Welcome to the Show Me the Money panel, Funding for Startups. My name is Andrew Channon, and I will be moderating today's panel. Next to me, we have Tom Kellermann from Strategic Cyber Ventures. Next to him, Bob Ackerman from Allegis Capital. And next to him, we have Alberto Yepez from Trident Capital Cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is a very wide-ranging area, and it brings people from all different backgrounds. I thought we would just start off, if you want to learn about everyone's, their companies, their backgrounds, there's plenty of information online and on the website. But what brought each of you to the cybersecurity space?
So I'm a reformed hacker. I grew up overseas, and then I had a college professor that turned me to the light. I began my career at the World Bank Treasury Security Team, and recently I was the CSO of Trend Micro before starting this fund with my partner.
So my background is, educational background is computer science, particularly on the operating system side. So back in my operating days, we spent a lot of time dealing with security issues related to operating systems. And when I jumped to the venture side of the equation, that was the natural path from an intellectual perspective and an area where I felt there was a lot of opportunity. So you sort of follow the passion.
Indeed, and I am also an engineer by training. I spent my first 10 years at Apple Computer. It was a great innovation company, and left in '95, right when the internet was just starting, and I started consulting with firms that wanted to use the internet for business. And the biggest issue I tried to solve is how do you manage access to these confidential data in transactional systems. After that, raised capital, company got acquired, became part of a public company called Entrust, and then ended up running Entrust for a little while. Worked with a couple of private equity firms in New York, in Boston, and then ended up in venture with Trident Capital as a partner. So Trident Cybersecurity is a fund dedicated exclusively to cybersecurity.
So cybersecurity is a constantly evolving industry. What drives the threat landscape, and how does that affect your investment decision making?
I think it's important to note that this thing called a kill chain has been modernized significantly over the past 3 or 4 years. And what we used to call the APT threat has now been adopted by criminal groups around the world. Our biggest challenge is the fact that the adversary is already inside of our networks, dwelling on our networks, moving laterally through our infrastructure and our supply chains. And this is why essentially the cybersecurity industry as a whole has failed in thwarting the threat of today, which is why we try to invest in disrupting that kill chain. At Strategic Cyber Ventures, our thesis is intrusion suppression. How can you detect, deceive, divert, and contain an adversary unbeknownst to an adversary within your environment or supply chain?
So I guess from our perspective, like Alberto, our firm is purely focused on cybersecurity. And at a macro level, kind of our view, we take sort of a thematic view in terms of the global economy runs on a digital substrate. And when you talk about cybersecurity, you're talking about the vulnerability of that digital substrate. The fact that when things go wrong, they go wrong at the speed of light. And so thematically, it's an area where you've got a very, very large opportunity, critical importance of kind of getting it wrong. But the nature of the threats, sort of building off Tom's point, continue to evolve. And so it's an area that requires nonstop innovation. This is a problem that never really is solved. It's addressed for a period of time, then the threats evolve. And so from an investor's perspective, if you kind of net it out, what you find is an area that is very large, rapidly growing. Investment in the domain is non-discretionary. It's a market that's driven by innovation. You have to be at the cutting edge of innovation, otherwise you're just not effective or competitive. Innovation is done on the private side of the ledger. There's a virtuous path to liquidity to the public companies that all need to basically acquire innovation. When companies exit, they exit at about a 30% premium to typical enterprise software companies. And everything in that ecosystem is totally uncorrelated with anything else in the market. So NASDAQ is off, heaven forbid, 50% tomorrow. Cyber budget's unaffected. So it's a virtuous domain, if you will, which is very large, requires very deep technical expertise. It's driven by innovation. And if you understand the domain, you have an unfair competitive advantage when it comes to identifying the innovation, understanding how the market moves and shapes, and where to plug in, how to capitalize, monetize, and exit.
Well, very little to add on what Bob said, but I would say if you want to net it down, is basically economic gain, right? People exercise, the bad guys come in and want to be able to gain, economic gain. And the other one is competitive advantage. And it's not just between companies, but also with nation states.
Absolutely.
So those are the couple of issues that really drive the threat landscape. And as our lives continue to be increasingly digital in the way we learn, communicate, transact, just relate, engage is basically going to continue to be, broadly, create a broader spectrum of capabilities to do bad things to that digital life that we're beginning to live.
Great. My next question is going to be a two-parter. You can answer it in any order. But the first part would be, there are many VC companies, and VC isn't just capital. It can also be advice or many other areas of expertise that they can share with their portfolio companies. What makes your company different, aside from just the capital aspect? And then also areas that you're looking to invest in. Where do you think that you're looking at things differently than your competitors may be?
So intrusion suppression is our thesis. We never invest in the same type of security control twice. We help our companies grow both their BD and their go-to-market strategies, but their technology roadmaps to align with partnership strategies and the threat landscape as it exists today. Some significant cybersecurity companies that we all know of have failed in their market success because they had a silver bullet solution that was bypassed by the adversary. We need to appreciate that. And it's also important to note that our portfolio members go to market together as a group, as a tribe almost, trying to leverage this construct of intrusion suppression into proactive, forward-leaning CISO environments.
So I think from our perspective, we're classically an early stage investor. So, euphemistically, two guys or gals and a dog in a garage who want to change the world. That's where we engage. So a lot of what we do is not so much finance as it is building companies. And so, our team is, organized around that premise of not just identifying opportunities and being able to establish a partnership connection with an entrepreneur and their team, but then being able to bring tangible value the table. So we have a group, in addition to our general partner team, we have a group of 6 venture partners that are all drawn from industry. They're all seasoned senior executives that have built companies and achieved a level of success. Most recently we announced Dave DeWalt joining us as a venture partner. So, it's folks with deep expertise that can really partner with those entrepreneurs to help them take the vision and successfully execute and engage the marketplace. So it's, a lot of people would describe it, as very much old-fashioned venture capital. So I tell people I'm not a finance guy, I build companies. And so it's that early stage engagement, trying to find people that share a vision around how markets are going to develop, where we can truly partner and roll up our sleeves together to build a company. Then bringing that operational capability, bringing the customer network, something that we all agree and try to pursue to, if you will, manage the risk side of go-to-market for these innovative companies.
Yeah, helping bring scale. Very similar. Again, I'm very excited because there's a lot of emerging firms coming into cybersecurity and becoming cybersecurity specialists, and most of them are former operators. You don't see a lot of people coming just specifically from the financing background. So the times you may be able to achieve that in social media and other things, but cybersecurity, it's you have to have had the experience, run a company, have a little bit of the gray hair to really face the issue. When you look at the best investors in cybersecurity, including in the large funds, former product managers, former chief security officers, former CEOs that really understand both the nature of the opportunity, the way to engage with entrepreneurs to bring scale, and then so how do you differentiate all things being equal? I think it's what you have to bring to the table, and bringing a scale and reducing go-to-market and time to value is really what we're all focused on. In our case, we built a team that has a former investment banker that had some operating background. We have a former sales and marketing executive that has done a lot of channel development. I come in having run 3 cybersecurity companies successfully to exit, and then we just added a corporate development executive because a lot of times in the private markets you want to grow organically, but there's opportunities given the amount of money that is in the market right now to do consolidation private to private. So what we're trying to do is a pretty well-rounded team. Instead of going after, let's get everybody to be a product manager, have a specific background. No, we're trying to round up so when an entrepreneur walks in, it's not like they're making an investment with a partner, they're getting a group of people. And like Bob, we have built a very broad advisory board where we have about maybe 47 people, four groups, chief information security officers that inform our investment. What are you trying to solve that you don't have commercial products? We have former entrepreneurs or current entrepreneurs that really like to get involved with innovative companies, helping us through due diligence, helping us to become advisory members in the in the companies or become executives in that. The third group of people that we engage are board members, because one of the areas is one of my biggest blind spots as an entrepreneur is the value of the board and how they can help you not only with governance, but get you the introductions and the scale. And the fourth group of people is former government officials, where you actually can deal with policy and influence policy in government. So anyway, that's the broader perspective in how we differentiate, and we're all trying to figure out how is that edge to be able to bring value.
You know, it's an area where this stuff is not easy. You know, it's very, very complex. It's technically deep, and there are a lot of really talented entrepreneurs who have those technical capabilities and are domain experts. But almost inevitably what you find is they have significant blind spots when it comes to sort of commercial DNA. And you know, to Alberto's point, when you're operating in this domain, you better understand the landscape, you better understand the technology, otherwise it all sounds good. But once you pick a team to partner with, there's the need to really add a lot of expertise in terms of taking that technical vision and getting it to the market. You know, we may touch on it, we have a platform in Columbia, Maryland that takes technical teams out of the NSA. And, you know, I affectionately refer to them as, you know, my favorite Asperger's folks. And in our business, Asperger's is a really good thing. You know, but there's a lot of blind spots when you start talking about use cases, POCs, product roadmaps. The eyes glass over, you might as well be speaking Sanskrit. You know, they are subject matter experts in very focused, very deep areas. And when you try and get them to take that expertise and apply it towards broader, you know, market constraints, it's a challenge. And so they really lean on you for all the experience. You know, it's what about product management? What is product management? All of the commercial skills that are necessary to be able to envision that vision. And, you know, in cyber, you know, the small number of us that kind of operate in this domain, it's understanding the domain, but it's having the willingness and having the skills to kind of roll up your sleeves and engage with these entrepreneurs to help them become successful business people.
I want to make sure that the audience understands this. You know, the corner cases that our intelligence community has to deal with in terms of the volume of data, the actual threat landscape, the sophistication, both in defensive, and they're the only ones that can do offensive, it's amazing. So from a subject matter expertise, they're almost second to none. We have the best hackers in the world. But what Bob said, he mentioned something, product management, is how do you commercialize that knowledge of what you've been able to deal with at a large scale and with very sophisticated adversaries to really create a commercial offering. They can do a one-off. They can create one of the best hacking platforms or tools, et cetera, that can actually make them an edge. Bit of what happens in New York too. We have great engineers in working in the large financial institutions, but they do a one-off. They do the best trading system, the best of these. But when you're trying to get into a commercial offering, you want to sell thousands of these, depending on the market that you're going to do. So the disciplines of product management and commercialization, you will find a lot of hotbeds in terms of entrepreneurship, including Israel, I would say. They have great innovation, but the knowledge how to be successfully commercial is highly misunderstood.
Right. I think it's fair.
Yeah.
And to that misunderstanding, the technology needs to evolve beyond perimeter defense, endpoint security, firewall technology. The environment has moved from burglary to home invasion in terms of the experience of hacking. And we need to remember that the adversary's goal is to maintain omniscience and to be telepathic within an ecosystem. So decreasing that dwell time and creating a product that can allow you to visualize that decrease in dwell time is paramount. And I think that is the holy grail in today's environment. Can you react fast enough? Right now, we're waiting months on end to realize attacks into tier 1 organizations. And the sector outside of the government that you want to be most successful in is the financial sector. especially specific financial institutions that have proactive leadership from a security perspective.
So cybersecurity is clearly a global concern and of global importance. We've heard the United States and Israel commonly mentioned already today. Are there any other countries that maybe would surprise people that you're looking at or seeing some innovation as far as cybersecurity goes?
You've got great stories.
Well, a couple of my friends are in front of me. They're from Spain. We've been very lucky to find great entrepreneurship in domain expertise in Spain. We're investors in a company called Alienable, which was an open source project. And you will find it in many entrepreneurs where you don't have a ecosystem for creating large companies. They always end up doing open source projects first, and they get noticed, whether it's in the Eastern Europe, Spain, other places. But we've been lucky. We've done a total of 3 investments in Spain, and one of them, Alienable is doing extremely well, and we're planning to potentially entertain a public offering. But it's one of those where it was a surprise, but there's less competition, because you either go to DC, you go to Silicon Valley, you go to Israel, and there's a lot of people looking for that talent. So anyway, Spain is one of the ones that has been surprisingly very good for us.
I mean, we look at, we don't invest outside of the United States just because an early stage investor. We need to be close to be able to actively support a company. But we certainly see things coming out of Europe.
Yeah.
And not necessarily in the numbers that you find from other places, but selectively very, very solid quality. And there's not really an ecosystem in Europe to support these companies, particularly early stage companies. If you look at the venture capital ecosystem in Europe, I was in London last week and I was teasing people. I said, what you guys call early stage is when we go to the bank and get a loan.
Yes.
It's the domain of ex-bankers who want to be venture capitalists, and it's come back to me when you're EBITDA positive. So it's an ecosystem that's not there to support some of the innovation. So, we're working on something right now out of the UK that is based on some analytics. It's a phenomenally talented and very, very capable team. They started there. They're actually incorporated in the US, and they'll move the commercial team over to the US. So, I think one of the points that we all talk about is Silicon Valley is overcapitalized with respect to opportunity. So we're all looking for where are those pockets of innovation where there are phenomenally talented people, and the market is not necessarily overcapitalized, because overcapitalization actually takes the risk-reward relationship and increases the risk. It doesn't lower the risk. We've got a very active program, as I indicated, in Maryland, called Data Tribe, where we start companies. Why did we do that? There are 3.5 times as many cyber engineers in the Beltway as there are in the rest of the United States combined. We're fundamentally in the engineering business. So I'm looking for deep reservoirs of really, really experienced engineering talent. And the U.S. intelligence community has worked very closely with the University of Maryland to identify curricula that keep students at the cutting edge of innovation. And their grad school is the NSA. And so as Alberto indicated, we've got a lot of teams that come out of the NSA, and people say, in particular, offensive people. They say, why offensive people? I say, because they're sneaky bastards. and cyber is about sneaky bastards. It's about the really good offensive people make the best defensive people. So you're looking for where that expertise is. And there's a lot of things in the Silicon Valley playbook, around product management, around go-to-market that is absolutely essential. But when you start looking for deep reservoirs of technical expertise, it's not all in Silicon Valley. And fundamentally, for early stage, that's what we're looking for.
Yeah, we've been very fortunate to actually back General Keith Alexander, the former director of the NSA, U.S. Cyber Command. When he left the NSA, he was going to go like any other former official to join the big boards of Lockheed and all the integrators. And we said, Keith, what do you really want to do? He's an engineer by training, has a couple of patents on his name. And he says, why don't you just bootstrap your company? Go talk to the people you solved the problem with. And several of these companies were here in New York. And after he came back with the idea of what he wanted to build, given the technology 10 years or 15 years later, what he had to implement inside the NSA is, I have a commercial offering that really is going to monitor all activity in all networks, and I'm going to use the same techniques of behavioral analytics to be able to do that. And engaging with them has been enlightening. We'll probably learn more about the discipline of cyber, talking about offensive versus defensive cyber. But what we bring to the table is the commercialization aspect. And Tom, you've been very involved also with that community, so I'm sure you have some insights there.
Well, I'd like to flip it on its head. Offense must inform defense. So I think the best talent is Russian speaking, and they build the best weapons in cyberspace. And everything we are investing in and all the capabilities we are investing in has to stand up to that litmus test. It has to disrupt that kill chain. And so when we think about cybersecurity, we're talking about bulletproof glass and bulletproof vests and defensive countermeasures. But these countermeasures, the purpose is to disrupt those types of attack techniques and protocols. And so any CTO that I meet that is not cognizant or embrace the logic that there are far superior hackers in the Eastern Bloc is someone that I may not want to do business with.
Sure. So we kind of touched on it a little bit, and specifically Bob did here, but to address the human capital issue, clearly you've all been very successful in finding the entrepreneurs and the technologies and solutions that are out there, but how do you address the human capital issue? I think we discussed that there's over 1 million openings right now for jobs in the next several years, 1.5 or more million opening jobs. Clearly, you mentioned being in DC is something that helps, but what else?
Well, personally, I'm a professor at American University. I'm a fellow at the Wilson Center, so I try to educate people. I think there's a gap, not just from engineers to business people, there's a gap of translators. There's a gap of analysts who can translate the technical jargon into legalese, the technical jargon into risk management, who can concisely speak to a strategy that might be effective to protecting a brand through the deployment of technology. I think there is this wide opportunity. Besides the 1 million open positions in cybersecurity out there, there's probably 2 million positions out there of people who need that hybrid, multidisciplinary approach to the translation of this to risk management, to legalese, et cetera.
I think there's a couple different approaches to it. I mean, first of all, at a macro level, you have the skills gap. The skills gap has to be filled. You see a lot of mobilization sort of in the educational infrastructure. Not everyone, for example, needs to have a degree in computer science to be effective in cybersecurity. So it's a tremendous opportunity for the 2-year junior college programs to develop skill sets so that graduates can engage the next generation of tools that we're all developing that automate more of this process and make it easier to identify and isolate threats, for example, and tools to remediate and respond to those threats. So there's a big educational element to this. Universities, particularly I think 2-year programs around the country are really mobilizing to go after this. On the product side where we tend to operate, I will tell you, every major customer that my companies are engaging with today, want services to come along with the product. And it's not because we want to be in the services business, it's because they can't find enough people. So they push that services load back on us. If you're going to roll XYZ out at JP Morgan, there better be a services wrapper around that to install and support it, because JP Morgan, even with the relationships with guys like Deloitte, don't have enough people. So that affects our business plans, but it also informs some of the product development that we're looking at. If you look at things that are going on in cyber threat analytics, orchestration, and automation, all of that is about taking massive amounts of information overload, and making it more manageable and making it more actionable. So there is a product response to the skills deficit to try and fill that void.
We're taking a very different approach in trying to figure out where do we find a cyber talent and how we developed it. So they're in 3 areas. One, we want to increase diversity in cybersecurity. Everybody talks about STEM, nobody argues about it, but why don't we focus a lot of the STEM efforts into cybersecurity given the demand? So minority, women, Hispanics, African Americans have an opportunity to really partake in a booming business. It's not going to stop anywhere. It's just beginning. So I'm chairman of a group called Hispanic IT Executive Council, where we have some of the most successful Hispanic Latinos that actually are in very, very unique positions to influence. CIO of Facebook, one of the CTOs of Bank of America, CIO of Hershey. So very accomplished people, and one of the things we're driving is building that pipeline for the next generation technology leaders that happen to be Hispanic and Latinos, but we're focusing them and trying to go for where the puck is going, where the demand is. The other group is, we're also looking at, there's a group called INCMCP, which is the International Consortium of Minority Professionals. So there's a group that has specifically to cybersecurity that is now building in their second year, trying to build that pipeline for cybersecurity students, because like Bob said, is you don't have to be an engineer. You could be an analyst, you could be an operator, you could be an engineer, you could be a project manager, but driving that. And the third bucket of that we're really trying to drive success is veterans. The discipline that they have and the engagement that they have when they go on deployments, they use a lot of technology. And we have found a lot of great talent that has context, which is where it begins, but also if you focus on the right energy, you actually will get great cybersecurity professionals.
Fantastic. Kind of changing the pace, and we'll be opening it up to Q&A from the audience shortly, so have your questions ready. But what's your favorite due diligence question?
Who is your strongest competitor, and why are they better than you?
So I've got two, and part of it is the ex-CEO in me. It's like when you wake up at 2 a.m. with sweats, what woke you up? It seems a little corny, but I'll tell you, we've both been there, right? When you're a CEO, and you live on what you kill every day. Yeah. You become acutely aware of all the things that can go wrong. And I teach at Berkeley in the MBA program. We don't teach this stuff. You really have to learn it. You have to experience it. So I'm looking for self-awareness, and a little bit of candor. The CEO who's like, no, I've got no problem, it's all under control, is lying or ignorant. And so you're trying to tease that out in terms of, can we have a relationship where we can be honest with each other? The other thing that I focus on, particularly with security companies, is tell me about your security protocols. If you're effective, they're going to come at you. So let's talk about what you're doing to secure your product offering, your infrastructure. And I will tell you, half the time people kind of look at you and they tilt their head. And back to your point, there are really smart guys out there that will find an ability to compromise you. So it's not just the solution you deliver to the marketplace, but it's how secure is your infrastructure.
Yeah, it's just unfair to be the last one to speak. But anyway. On top of the 3 issues that have already been added, when you become investor, you acquire the liabilities of the company. Yeah. So a lot of times there's a self-awareness that a lot of people use open source, and some open source libraries are not being used with the right licensing schemes. So one of the things that surprised a lot of our potential investments is we're going to do an open source scan of your code. No, we have the libraries, we can give it to you. Now, we're going to bring a third party, is going to do an assessment of the open source, and unequivocally, you'll find, you can have the best engineering process, you can have the best, source code control and everything else, but you need to make sure that whatever you're building is clean. The other one is we do the security assessment. It says, what do you mean? We're security professionals. No, when I bring a third party, they're going to do an assessment, and undoubtedly you'll find the issue. And the third thing we do actually is we do background checks on the founding team, because you'll be surprised what you'll find with people coming out from different walks of life. So we tend to be a bit more, because we know that the moment we invest, we become liable, and more importantly, the moment we exit the company, and it's a large company that actually is going to acquire you, guess what? They're going to do the same thing to you. So why don't you fix the problem before it becomes a bigger problem? So we have a pretty disciplined approach to due diligence, and I think at the end, it becomes a better company.
So this one, we'll try to do 60 to 90 seconds each, but I'm personally really curious. Do you have a nightmare story, something where either you were a company that you were getting involved in, whether it was a prospective company, a portfolio company, or something from a competitor to one of your portfolio companies, something like that kept you up at night, or you found yourself in the middle of something that you didn't expect to see?
Getting sued by your competitor on IP. Many people don't give the value of building your own IP. And when you're being sued, either the competitor figures out that you're taking market share from there, so therefore build your IP portfolio so that you counter that. That's probably the biggest nightmare. And we have invested in companies that have been sued, but effectively, instead of taking a defensive approach, we take a very offensive approach by either having the IP or acquiring patents to sue them back. I can give you horror stories where we got engaged, but that's one.
Perfect. No, I was going to go this, we shared an experience once where it's just, particularly, look, intellectual property is really, really important, but intellectual property won't make a startup successful. But if you don't handle it correctly, it can get you into a whole lot of trouble. And intellectual property can be in the form of patents, it can be in the form of confidential information. And you don't have to be guilty to be sued. Mm-hmm. You just need to behave in a way which allows somebody to bring a cause of action against you. And when that involves very large companies or competitors, tremendously distracting. And it can always happen at absolutely the worst moments in time. You're trying to raise the next round of financing, and all of a sudden a large competitor decides it's time to sue you. And so those protocols around how you handle confidential information, around proper licensing of information, when you're bringing somebody out of a competitor to join you, to make sure they're not bringing anything with them, and there's an affirmation that they're not bringing anything with them, all of that leads to contamination, which represents unbounded risk that has nothing to do with the market or the product.
Farmers versus hunters. CEO that hires a bunch of comfortable farmers instead of hungry hunters and gives these farmers over a year to hit their numbers troubles me.
Great. All right, I think it's a perfect time to open up to Q&A. I think there's some microphones going around. If you want to try to shout out the first question, and then we'll bring the mic around.
There are questions over there.
I'll shout.
Sure.
Yeah.
My name's Anita. I'm from a startup called Yepez in application security. Okay, now I better not shout, or else. No. So we get contradictory advice about open sourcing our innovation. So on the one hand, we're told open source so that you build market share and brand awareness. And on the other hand, we're told protect your intellectual property and patent your results. Under what circumstances is it wise to open source a technology from a startup versus keeping it protected?
Well, I'll give you one perspective. Some of the stuff that we do coming out of the NSA has got open source elements to it. The NSA will put technology into the public domain, and we'll grab a technology team and build around it. I always worry about that. I always worry about where's the defensive perimeter and how do you defend your value proposition. For me, throwing things into the open source environment is okay as long as you know what the next play is. Just putting it out there so you get adoption, that's great. How are you going to make money? How does that enable the second play, in your playbook? And a lot of times you see people, throw things out and they get giddy about the adoption. But if you don't know how to make money, that's a problem. And support, by the way, is not my definition of making money. We're looking for product leverage with high gross margins. That doesn't mean supporting open source. So for me, it's the enabler and understanding what it enables.
We move the model upside down. We look at open source projects where we can help commercialize rather than having our own companies do open source.
Yeah.
Because typically you enjoy the community, you need the engagement, and that's where and then of course separate what the open source project is from your commercial offering. And that you still can build your own IP portfolio on the commercial. So we don't necessarily say, if we have a very unique IP, don't necessarily go too quickly to say open source part of it. So we tend to be the other way around. And also has to deal with the maturity of the market. When you have more mature markets, there may be open source, they compete with commercial offerings. And it becomes in a speed, pricing, timing, value in a short period of time.
Do two more questions?
1, 2.
Great.
Yes, Dominic Gandolfo from CyberSafe Solutions. We're a startup MSSP. I hear often that there's a lot of investment in technology, When it comes to investing in a managed security services provider, how much value do you put in looking into how they deliver the message? Because to me, the most important thing is being able to get to the C-suite, being able to educate them enough for them to understand the problem. Because you can have the best tool in the world, if you don't break through that barrier, what sort of value do you put in to the actual people that can deliver the message and not so much the technology behind it?
Security as a service is actually a fact of life now, and it's actually addressing that shortage of professionals that we have. So we're seeing increasingly more and more of the traditional channels where you have a distributor in a bar that is taking your product to market being MSSPs. The issue is, what is unique about your offering? Are you just putting things together and there's not a lot of IP going? There's maybe some liabilities around how you deliver your offering. But I would say, we're very comfortable actually investing in services companies. We invested in NeoHapsis, which is a company that Cisco acquired. Qualys arguably is a large MSSP that goes to market through MSSPs. But I would say always have just not a Me Too offering, have a distinguished offering either in terms of the capability or the market segment. I think you're in a very exciting market addressing one of the biggest issues with our industry.
I think, for me, it comes down to cost of acquisition and cost of deploying the service or delivering the service. Those are the things I look for. Alberto's right. We all know that managed security service providers is a huge direction for a significant segment of the marketplace. It comes down to cost of acquisition and cost of delivering the service. So
I would stress that I need to understand your security strategy. If it's all about compliance and blocking and tackling, it would have less interest to me than if you believed in something like an intrusion suppression. And then it depends on what types of technology you're going to be deploying for proactive customer sets.
Great, and one more quick question.
Yeah, my name is Ihab Shraim. I represent Binary Guard. It's also a startup company. We've been in business for about 2 years. We're funded, I would say, quite well. We have a very, very, very smart, innovative idea. Here's our problem. We are ahead of the market in thinking in terms of how we analyze malware. Now, we do have customers. We have a multi-billion-dollar customer on our platform at a very, very low cost, as you know. We're trying to protect our IP. The larger companies are basically where I'm trying to partner with them. But every time I go to some of these meetings, I feel like there's a brain rape that happens to us. We have a very unique, very, very smart idea ahead of the market. How do you advise us to go next? We also filed for the patents, or patent pending, and I don't think anyone, and our competitors in this space are not many. It's a brand new area. How do you advise us to go next? To get well-funded, too.
In terms of well-funded, regardless of where your stage is, we look for validation, but it's not ours. It has to be customers. If you have customers that instead of the two of us agreeing that you have the greatest thing, if there's a customer or multiple customers tell me, this is the greatest thing and this is what I do, and then that's when we come in and help you commercialize. But I think I would focus really in your reference accounts. If your reference accounts become very credible, and then we can see that addressable market, because when you say malware analysis, already goes up the flag, how many people are doing that already? So the competition, right? And so part of it is, okay, is it unique? No, how big is the market? Is it unique? Who's the team? What is the go-to-market strategy? And who are the investors and reference accounts? Well, that's what we look in any investment in regardless. So I think, part of it is I would just singly focus on your reference accounts, and that's what's going to drive it. And then being ahead of the market is probably one of the biggest nightmares. I was going to choose that as an answer to your question, because in many times I've been ahead of the market, and we tend to be always over-optimistic and overspend. And by the time you do that, you have a suboptimal exit. So be prudent and fiscally responsible when you are driving, your go-to-market.
Yeah, I think if I was just building on Alberto's comment, I think you've got to find people you trust. You need that validation, and whether it's at the customer level or, quite frankly, in dealing with venture capitalists, not all partners are alike. There are venture capital firms that I gladly do business with, and there are venture capital firms that I will not let anywhere near one of my portfolio companies. I think the same thing happens with strategic partners, and I think you need to do your homework, and you're gonna have to make a value decision in terms of, can you get where you need to get in a level that you're comfortable? And if the answer is yes, well then good. If not, what are your alternatives? And if you don't have any alternatives, you have a problem. Back to the first conversation. But I think understanding the nature of a strategic partner that may be doing some validation is really important. From a customer perspective, by and large, customers are not going to pick up your technology, bring it in-house, and run with it on the development side, not the business they're in. Strategic partners is where you run into some of that risk. And even there, I will tell you that I think the fear in most cases is exaggerated. The ability to pick up somebody else's intellectual property and run with it is overstated. Doesn't mean it's not a concern, but it's walking into IBM and IBM's going to pick up your intellectual property and run with it. Not going to happen. IBM's going to have you sign a non-disclosure agreement to make sure that you're not telling them anything that's proprietary because they're paranoid about being sued. So,
All right. Thank you, everyone, so much. Tom, Bob, Alberto, thank you.
Thank you.
thanks. Good.